Alright, so today we're going to talk about Lancelot's Rekkas. Now, last time we talked about staggers, and among those, you know, you got your normal, like, dash close 5M staggers, your 5L staggers. You can even dash a little bit. That's technically slightly minus, so you can get mashed out of that. So in order to enforce that, you need to eventually just decide not to dash. So you can do, like, and then do like normal staggers from this range into an M button eventually to try to frame trap, right? But what happens if they don't mash? Well, if they don't mash, then you basically are just you're stuck having them block this this farm normal, and that's not really ideal. You don't want to end on a farm normal all the time. So you extend your frame traps, and you do that by doing Rekka buttons. The important thing about Lancelot's Rekkas are that the frame data on them actually changes depending on how close you are. So if you're super close, you can see this is minus. At worst, it's like -3 or -4, depending on which version Rekka you do, which is good. That's actually super good in this game because that means you can't be punished by a 5L, and that's exactly what you want. At best, you can actually make them plus. So if you get them to block it from around here, well, that was even. It's a little bit tricky. The range is kind of, depending on which one you're doing, it's a little bit harder on the L version to get the range right. That was slightly minus. There you go. That's the plus one. You can do the same thing with the M version. But this one is a little bit easier to make either even or plus. The frame data is a little bit better in that aspect. Also because the range moves further forward. So the idea here is you want to frame trap into Rekkas, and you also want to do this at a range where it'll be plus afterwards. So if they press a button, they'll get counter hit. So you have like a double layer mix up here. You can either do a frame trap into the Rekka, or you can do a frame trap after the Rekka if you space it correctly. So what does this look like? Let's see how this works. So we've set Cat to mash with a 5L here. So at this range, she'll press far 5L. If we're really close, she'll press a close 5L. And let's try to frame trap her with a Rekka. And we got punished immediately. So this is one of the things you have to be careful about with Lancelot's Rekkas. If you do them from too far of a distance, or you delay it too much, you'll actually get punished. There's also certain ranges where, like, so if I do a block string here and I get like a, if I get it to be like evenish, right? If the other person knows how Lancelot works, they're gonna want to press a button at certain ranges. So they're a counter hit, right? And this is the situation we normally want. But what happens after the Rekka is blocked here? I press 2M, which in the current version is 6 frames, and I got punished by her 5L, which is, well, counter hit out of the 2M by her 5L, which is I believe a 6-frame normal. The reason for that is because we were actually slightly minus there. Let's see it. Let's turn this off real quick. Well, that was random. That's not what I want. So this is plus. That is even. And this is slightly minus. So on this block string, we're slightly minus. You have to understand that the ranges change here because of the pushback of the 2M. The normal, really, it doesn't matter if it's 2M, 5M, whatever you do. It changes the spacing on the Rekka. So you just kind of have to get used to how to understand what range they're going to be at after they block the normal in order to know like which Rekka to do. Maybe I shouldn't press a button here. But yeah, the general gist is his Rekkas are great for frame trapping, and they have 2 follow-ups because they're a Rekka, right? They're actually a true Rekka. So you have this and that. Now you don't want to do this last one on block. You never want to do that and have it be blocked. That's awful. In general, I would recommend not doing it at all for the most part. You need to do it like maybe once in a match to scare the other person into thinking that you're willing to do it. If you really have the read on when they're going to press a button, it's okay to do. But outside of that, you probably don't want to do that. Sometimes, let me see if I can get this. If it's blocked, like at a super far range, some characters will miss their punish if they weren't expecting it. Like around that range. And you can do this on whiff in neutral too, which I'll get to that a little bit later. Anyways, so getting back to the frame traps, let's just talk about the different frame traps that Lancelot can do with his Rekka series. So, to start off with, let's say you want to stay on top of them for some reason. You want to make this person nervous. You want to go for throw mix-ups. What happens? You can do auto combo, right? Rather than getting pushed out by doing staggers like this, sometimes you just be like, all right, I'm gonna be right here. And what this allows is this is also only slightly minus. So after that, you can do a throw. But you can also frame trap there. So let's say Catalina knows you're gonna go for a throw here. So because of that, she's going to mash. She wants to mash either just raw mash a normal. Some people get really ballsy and they'll press like a 5H there. But let's assume that our player is smart and they're gonna do the option select, the throw option select. The one where you mash basically like 5L and then you plink the second one. And you get auto combo if it's on hit or block, right? So we're gonna assume that's what our cat player here is gonna do, because she basically, in case she misses the timing, she wants to get that throw tech. So if you use M, you can frame trap. What happens if you use L though? Well, that's not a frame trap. That's a gapless block string. In truth, you can actually make this into a frame trap by delaying it, but it's really hard. Because you can't buffer it, and you have to delay it super late, there's really a super small tight window on this. It's really hard to get the L version to be a frame trap here. There we go, I got it. And if you can do it, it's really good, and the reason for that is because, and this is really important, this will come up later, on counter hit specifically, you get a standing conversion only on L version. Only on the L Rekka. If you get a standing counter hit on the M Rekka, you actually don't get a conversion off of that, like into a normal. You can't link a 5L into that. Or after that, rather. You have to just finish the Rekka. That's all you can do. So if I look at that, I can't combo there if I frame trap with M Rekka. So instead, I just have to confirm by doing the rest of the Rekka. As long as you're holding back, you can continue pressing the button to confirm. So just in general, I recommend just holding back and then seeing if they got hit or not. You can easily confirm it from there. But if you can do the L version, it can lead to really high damage. So with that being said, why do we want to use the second part of the Rekka? So basically what happens here is you're playing a guessing game. So if I know that the person isn't going to mash until after the first Rekka, because I've already counter hit them with the first Rekka enough times, so like if I did that, they're like, oh, well, maybe I shouldn't mash there, right? So then you can delay the second hit of the Rekka to frame trap after that. Because basically what happens is, if you know they're going to block the first hit of the Rekka, you can then press a normal after here, because it's only -4, right? This is enough to take back your turn, and if they block a 5L, like, it's 100% your turn, your pressure's basically started over. So because of that, a lot of people will wait until after the first Rekka, and then they'll mash. And you get counter hit. If they can counter hit you with pretty much anything up to an H button here, so you can take a lot of damage from doing that. So in order to get around that, you can counter hit them like that. The damage isn't all that good, it's only 900 damage, but it gives you your turn back, and that's important for Lancelot. Lancelot wants it to always be his turn. One important thing to note about Lancelot's Rekkas, though, is that by default, the first and second hits don't create a gap. So it depends what came before it, right? So here, this has no gap until there's no gap there. So they can't press a button until after they block the Rekka. But if I do the second hit, it also has no gap by default. However, the third hit always has a gap. 100% of the time, you cannot make that gapless. That's important, and it's also true for the M Rekka as well. That's important because if you're trying to frame trap somebody on the third hit, you have to know there's already going to be a gap there. So you don't want to delay that third hit unless they are also delaying when they press a button afterwards. So the way this works is, if you know they're going to try to take back their turn, immediately after blocking the second hit of the Rekka, you want to frame trap them at the earliest time possible. So in order to do that, the quickest time for the follow-up is perfectly fine. However, you'll come across players that sometimes will delay when they mash afterwards, and in that case, you want to delay the third hit. But if you delay it on somebody who's mashing immediately, you'll get hit like that. That's only useful if you know the other player is waiting to see if you do the third hit or not before they commit to something, and that's when you can frame trap them with a delayed third hit. Let's see, what else? So we talked about how you can't get anything off of that on standing. However, if the opponent for some reason decides they're going to mash a crouch button, which is more common than you might think, you get a full combo from this. That's really, really important. The type of player that you're fighting against, you can kind of sniff out how well they know the Lancelot matchup by how they get hit by his Rekkas. Basically, if they're getting hit standing, they probably understand. If they're getting hit standing after Rekka 1, maybe even Rekka 2, they understand that they don't want to get hit crouching because they give Lancelot a much better confirm if they do that. So you can tell just from that situation like how well they understand how to fight Lancelot. However, you can't always that's not always going to be the situation, right? Sometimes you have to press a crouching button. So once we know that the opponent kind of knows how to deal with Lancelot a little bit, there's a couple things that they tend to do once they've blocked Lancelot's Rekkas at range. Now, they usually like to press either a standing L or a crouching M button. Sometimes crouching L, depending on the character. It really just depends on their character's frame data. And the reason they like to do this is because, let's say you block a Rekka at about this range. Now, I pressed 5M afterwards, even though I'm usually around even or plus at this range, but if it's not 100% plus, like that's the plus range, right? But let's say I'm even, and they know that I'll be even after after a blocked 5M. I'll get counter hit because I wasn't actually plus at that range. If the opponent knows that you're going to be pushed back to a range where it's not actually going to be plus, they're still in range, they're going to try to challenge with different buttons. So the way we have to account for that and deal with that is different depending on what button they're pressing. So let's start by 5Ls, because this one is the one that I think most people probably struggle with the most. So you know how Lancelot pressure goes. You want to do this, and it'll usually counter hit them. Let's turn off the mash for a second so we can see the full block string. So you're plus there, right? You're either slightly minus or even there. If you do it from here, you're plus. If you do from here, you're about even, right? It was slightly minus. Here's the even range. Anytime it's even or slightly minus, they're going to want to challenge. And you can't do this repetitively. So, like, if they're in range to be able to do 2M afterwards, you are probably actually even. This works because even though you're even, 2M is only 6 frames. So keep that in mind, that you're playing with your own frame data here. Like far M is 7 frames, 2M is 6 frames, but the range on 2M isn't as good as the range on far 5M. So you have to just pick the right option depending on how far they are, how fast of a normal you need, and what buttons they're pressing. So once you've gotten away with doing this stuff a little bit, and they start challenging with far 5L. This one blows up a lot of Lancelot players because they don't know how to deal with it. So I'm getting counter hit here, right? If you space this to where it's actually even, you can do another raw Rekka immediately after the first one is blocked, and you'll whiff punish them for trying to mash with far 5L. This is really important because it not only will help you deal with characters with long far 5Ls, but it'll also help you deal with the Lancelot mirror. And I'll probably do a separate video on specifically talking about the Lancelot mirror later, because he's incredibly common to come across. He's a very powerful character right now and really popular. So, but that's the main way to deal with safely deal with far 5L. You can do other things too, like just raw call it out with a sweep, and that gives you good knockdown. It's only 700 damage, but it's way less safe. Whereas if they happen to block the second Rekka, it's like, okay, I got free chip damage and I'm -4, and you now have to guess if I'm gonna do the second Rekka or not. So it's overall a good situation for Lancelot even if the Rekka is blocked when you're trying to call out this far 5L. So just, keep that in mind before you take too big of a risk. Now let's talk about like long-reaching low normal. So in the Catalina matchup specifically, she likes to press 2M a whole lot, and it's super big. Leads to a lot of damage on hit if you're anywhere near the corner. It's fairly confirmable. It's just overall a really great normal, and it's hard to deal with sometimes. You have to be pretty careful. So what can we do? So if we know she's gonna press that button, the most obvious thing is just to do the second Rekka. So the reason they want to press 2M here is because after a blocked L Rekka, if you press far 5M, the 2M will low profile the far 5M. But if you press 2M, the range on 2M often isn't enough to actually counter hit the Catalina player for pressing 2M. So we can see that here. So I just got crushed. That's another thing. 2M's, even though 2M is now 6 frames, it has lower clash priority than it had in the previous version, so now it gets crushed by other M normals in most cases. So again, I'm getting crushed here. But if I press far 5M, I got counter hit. Here it clashed, that's lucky. And sometimes you can counter hit. But this is character specific, and some characters crouching normals will low profile you. If they challenge with far 5L a bit, most likely they're going to challenge with 2M when you're at a specific range where 2M is the better option. It'll reach farther, and it'll catch you trying to do this stuff. So once you've conditioned them to not mash far 5L by doing Rekka into other Rekka, they're gonna start pressing 2M instead. And the reason is obvious, because it low profiles and counter hits the startup or active frames of the Rekka. So what do we do in this situation? So I've already shown you can counter hit with the second Rekka. Another option, because at that point they're probably going to start DPing if they know that you're going for the second hit of the Rekka, or they'll just wait for you to do that and then block, or block until you've done that and then mash afterwards. So another way to keep up the less risky like Rekka 1 pressure is to just do that. Basically, you get the jump and jump U out during the active and recovery frames of their 2M, and now they usually don't have a chance to react to that happening. They have to know you're going to do that and just delay the 2M until after you've done that. So it's again another guessing game, and you're pretty advantaged in this. If you have your back to the corner, this can be dangerous, so I wouldn't recommend it there, but if your mid-screen or their back is to the corner, this is totally fine. Like, the risk of you getting hit by that 2M, unless they have 100 meter and are pretty much a god at confirming, is pretty low. So you can do this to Catalina, you can do this to Grand players, you can do this to Zeta players. Zeta is a little bit more finicky, but it does work. But yeah, this is another option if they're pressing 2Ls or 2Ms. This is great. This will go over the button. You are back in for 2L range pressure, and you can stagger from there. Once you've gotten them respecting your Rekkas and not immediately pressing buttons afterwards, what do? You throw them. You can either go for just raw throw, or maybe try to bait their throw by various methods. Just run up jump U, or neutral jump H, or you could even do like delay button, run up, make it look like you're gonna throw, and then do a button. But essentially, you want them to react. You want them to respect. You want them to respect Rekka so that you can then throw them. Because if you haven't noticed, Lancelot's damage is actually kind of low in comparison to the rest of the cast. So like a throw does 1500 damage, but a full auto combo into Rekka does around like 1800. So the damage difference is only 300, and in a lot of the cases where you frame trap somebody, the damage is actually similar to if you had thrown them. So if I set her to mash 2M here, I just got 1380 damage from frame trapping with a M Rekka. Whereas if I do a stagger, I just got 1770. It's only 270 more. So how do I throw them? The obvious ways are tick throw off of auto combo. This is also only -4, so if you get them to think that you're going to do a frame trap into Rekka, here. If you make them think you're going to frame trap off of the last hit of auto combo, you can actually just let it recover and then throw. That's super risky because the animation's really obvious, even though the frame data is actually only slightly minus. So you have to use that one really sparingly. But you can do other things. You can like throw a fireball or something if they are respecting a little bit more than usual. But the obvious option is just to use Rekka to close distance and stay on top of them and then throw afterwards. And then when they start teching there, you start doing either teching or like pressing a button or something. You start doing the delays there, and they usually get hit by that instead. And if they're crouching, you get a full combo from that. If they're only mashing at the end, we talked about how to frame trap with Rekka 3. There's really not a whole lot more to that. That's pretty much it. But what you can do is if you do get them to respect Rekka 3, it's actually possible to then reset off Rekka 2. This is still only -4. This is still only -4, so you can press a 5L after that, and if they didn't immediately commit to something, you'll probably counter hit them. If they then realize, oh crap, he didn't actually finish the Rekka, I should have pressed something, and they press late, you'll counter hit them. You can also tick throw like that in that same situation. But that's pretty much it for mix-up off of the Rekkas themselves. Usually that, if you've gone that far where you're doing auto combo, you're committing much harder than if you're doing like space Rekkas or like staggers into a space Rekka. This pressure is much more safe and less committal than doing that stuff. This is good just to keep people on their toes, but you don't want to be doing that all the time. So, especially against the Shoto characters, one thing you're going to find is that a lot of people will start waiting for you to do Rekkas, and then trying to react to the startup with an easy input DP. Especially if you're using like M Rekka, as soon as they see you committed to something other than the normal, they'll DP here. Especially among higher level players, that's very, very common. So what do you do in this situation? Well, if they're not pressing a normal, you can just raw press normals here. You can get away with just raw on block far 5Ms. You can do spot dodges to try to get them to react wrong to thinking that it's a Rekka when it's actually a spot dodge, and get them to whiff a DP. But another thing that I like to do is I'll do teleports, because if they're trying to react to something, if they're trying to react to Rekka specifically, then I can just do that, and now I'm behind them, and they're probably not ready for that. Some people are really, really, really good at looking for that, but you know, you have to do something else other than Rekka to get them to think a little bit more in order to open up the option to do that again. Another thing you can do is just raw Rekka. The whole deal with this is that you're telegraphing the Rekka frame trap from doing a normal, right? Because it's such a typical Lance thing to do, everybody knows he's going to do this. So they know it's a free DP as soon as they see the startup of something after the normal. So instead of that, you just stand at this range and you just Rekka. Give me that chip damage. I'm doing chip damage every time you block this. And if I want to scare you a little bit, I'll start occasionally doing the follow-up and maybe trying to press a button afterwards to take back my turn. You force them to make a decision by getting them to block this Rekka. Because they were so concentrated on like, looking for normal Rekka, that they forgot, oh, you can just do Rekka, and now I'm still plus. So there's kind of this mind game around his Rekkas, especially in neutral or mid-range, where you have to be kind of aware of that in order to play him like really effectively. To extend on this, when you're at this range, like, obviously Lance doesn't have a button here. Like, your button is sweep. You want to press sweep at that range. They know that. So they'll start like poking or doing other stuff. And in truth, what you can do at this range is Rekka. It's literally, you can whiff punish so many things by just doing raw Rekkas in this range. Sometimes they just run into it. But if it whiffs, like, unless they were 100% ready for that, and the frame data on Rekka is pretty quick. They don't have a whole lot of time to be like, oh crap, he just whiffed a Rekka, maybe I should press a button. Especially since you can whiff cancel into the second Rekka. So they have to play really carefully around this. And this is truly like the end game of Lancelot's neutral game. You want to get in their head enough where you can just raw Rekka as you want, and then it opens up the ability to like, oh, I'm gonna stand at this range, just kidding, I'm gonna press far 5H and they run into it. So that's the mind game you really want to play, and just keep in mind that because Lancelot's normals extend a hurt box, they're relatively weaker compared to like some of the Shoto characters, so you mostly want to be playing neutral with specials, so like this, occasionally this, if you can get it out, the ones that are actually plus. It's okay to sometimes do this, but since that's actually punishable, you need to do it at like max range. Oh, this is hard when they're not actually standing, hold on. You need to do this at like max range, where it's only slightly minus. But outside of that, your main neutral button is sweep. You need to get them to block a max range sweep or have it hit. So you're primarily going to be playing neutral with specials. So you want to maximize that by getting as much chip damage as you can. But the main thing to be aware of is that when he does Rekka, he pulls back a little bit. So you can see here, this startup animation of Rekka, he actually pulls his upper body back a little bit, and this actually helps allow normals and other attacks that have like a kind of pointed, pokey type hitbox to whiff. And then he moves forward with the Rekka and then punishes. So you want to leverage this as much as possible. This is one of the really critical things about playing neutral with his Rekkas that you want to be aware of, because this allows you to hit people who are explicitly trying to hit you out of Rekkas, or out of the frame traps into Rekkas. You can use this to really outplay the other person's buttons if you're good, if you get really good at it. And with that said, that's pretty much it for the basics of Rekka pressure with Lancelot.
Check out my live broadcasts at twitch.tv/Josua. I also have a Discord you can join by going to josua.net/Discord. You can also follow me on Twitter @Josua. If you've got any questions, drop them in the comments below, or drop by one of my Granblue Versus streams. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and if you're feeling super generous, drop me a Prime subscription over at Twitch. Thanks again!